Now, to the Marshall Islands and Kosrae, the climate emergency poses severe threats to its security, human rights, and everyday way of life as the sea level rises. Just last year, its government declared a national climate crisis. Its president said the failure of the international community to adequately respond to the global climate crisis of its own making holds particularly grave consequences. By 2050, many of its islands may be uninhabitable if we don't act now. That is something our next speaker, Bertine Lakjohn, is acutely aware of, having taken part in and led youth leadership camps and dialogues on the subject, which inspired her into taking environmental studies at college. Speaking with her now live is Ashley Kolaya, the former senior director of the YMCA Youth in Government program in Kentucky, USA, after which she joined the team at TED Talks to establish and increase the outreach of their Global Youth Voice program. During her tenure at TED, Ashley led the design and launch of the Youth Council for TED's Countdown Initiative, a massive worldwide effort to combat the climate crisis. Over to you, Ashley.
All right, I believe we are now live after a suspicious 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 count. Bertine, it's so good to see you. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing all right.
I know I am also doing very well. You and I have in common that it is early in the morning for both of us, right? It's 8 a.m. for me. I'm in California in the US. How about for you? Where are you right now, Bertine?
Right now, I am in Washington State, and it is also 8 a.m.
Okay, so we are west coast of the US, but that is not actually where you have spent the majority of your time. Can you share a little bit about your home in the Marshall Islands?
Yes, Yawayalib, that means hello, everyone in Marshallese. My name is Bertine Lakjohn. I am from the Marshall Islands and Kosrae, which are both part of Micronesia, and they are both home to the vast blue ocean, coconut trees, a beautiful ocean biodiversity, and unfortunately is at the front line of the wrath of climate change. But I've only ever lived in the Marshall Islands, and the Marshall Islands is a coral atoll, which is sort of like a ring shape of islands that surrounds a lagoon.
Okay, a ring shape of islands that surrounds a lagoon. That sounds to me um, like a place I might go on vacation if I wanted to boat around and look at fish. Can you share a little bit about, so that for me, that would be special and different because it's unlike where I live. Can you share a little bit about um, what your what it means to live in a place that has this kind of biodiversity? Like what are some things that are part of your day-to-day life and the environment of the Marshall Islands that might not be familiar to those of us who don't live in an island nation or have not spent time in Micronesia?
So life in the Marshall Islands is quite, I would say, a little bit slow and everything. Like we are always moving at a very chill pace. And
Island time?
yeah, it's sort of like the very good time and everything. And usually a day-to-day thing for me is that you would go to school, and if it were really hot, because the ocean is at your expense, you would just go and take a dip in the ocean and swim. And if you were hungry, you would just like walk around, because it's not that big of an island, the one that I live on specifically. And you can just walk around to the stores, you can get local food. Local food would be like fish, coconut, breadfruit, and a lot of more sort of, I don't know them in English, but I do know them in Marshallese, but yeah.
That's okay. You can say them in Marshallese. I think it's interesting to know. Like, what would your a common snack be, or something that you would get on your way home from school, or something for dinner?
So something that I would get on my way from home is probably like this chip. It's called med chips. Med in English is breadfruit, and it's sort of like this breadfruit that's like fried to become chip. And I would eat it with like a dried fish jerky, and that's probably like my favorite snack. It's a bit weird, but I really do like it.
I think that sounds delicious and amazing. I am curious about, you mentioned that where you live in the Marshall Islands is kind of on the front line of the climate crisis, the climate emergency. And I'm curious to know if in your day-to-day life in the Marshall Islands, if you have experienced anything that feels or looks different as a result of the climate crisis. Like, what would it look like to someone who lives in the Marshall Islands?
So I've been traveling a lot for my high school education. And so when I was a freshman, when I was a sophomore of high school, I had to leave in order to pursue education in Japan. And when I came back, it definitely was a lot more different because, of course, since we are on the equator, sort of near the equator, it's hot. But when I came back, it was a lot hotter than I remembered. And it was not because of the weather differences for me, because I usually go back and forth during the summer break. But then the summer that I was there when I was a senior, it was a lot hotter than I remembered. And we had a lot more rainfall. And there was a lot more, there was like a disease outbreak due to this excessive rain that we had in the country. And this disease was sort of related to the fact that we had like a damp environment, which is home to like mosquito-borne diseases, I guess.
Right. So what you're saying is it's more than just a change of seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
The temperature overall was noticeably different to you. The weather patterns are different, right? So more rain equals more opportunity. I mean, more rain than what your environment is used to is more opportunity for these mosquito-borne diseases and other illnesses. It's really interesting. So I'm curious. I know just from having chatted with you in the past that your time in Japan and then returning back to the Marshall Islands and discovering that your home was different in many ways led to your work to fight the climate crisis. Can you share a little bit about those first few steps? You know, what was the realization like, and what did you decide to do, and how did you do it?
So I am currently in the primary stages of my climate journey. I really just started my junior year of high school. So I'm really just trying to figure out in which direction would I really like to take my climate path. And so being home, I tend to ask myself questions like, am I concerned about the rising sea levels that I see that happen? The king tides? Am I concerned about the changing climate? Am I concerned about the diseases that arise due to the changing climate? And so I kind of ask these questions to myself, and then I look into areas where I think I could sort of develop more professionally in order to create solutions. And so I tend to I gravitate to asking myself, do I gravitate towards environmental policy that could sort of help me with those solutions, climate education, environmental management? And so in the past, I sort of invested myself in climate education and raising awareness as I took part in many educational climate camps in the Marshall Islands. And yeah, and so I learned a lot about the climate that I situated myself in and how it's impacted by climate change. And then with the information I obtained from all the camps, I sort of put myself in other camps that sort of helped me sort of raise awareness about it. And so I spoke to people, conducted presentations, and got involved and tried my best to sort of make sure that we were being heard in any outlet or opportunities given to me.
So, okay, great. I would love for you to talk and we just have a couple more minutes left. You mentioned going to environmental camps, and I love that what you're saying about being able to think about if you like policy or doing work on the ground, what would you suggest for somebody who has said, yes, I do care about these issues that are happening in my environment, and maybe they don't have access to an environmental camp or they don't know where to look? What would you suggest as a first step for somebody who wants to be involved but isn't exactly sure where they might fit in their, or what their journey might look like?
So I think I would say anywhere you start is definitely a start that contributes to a greener future within this climate journey, no matter how small you personally think it is. Because, for example, if you think you just want to stop using plastic personally, then I think you should do that, because you then grow with that initiative and then you learn things about it, and then you can extend that to others. And in a way, you can sort of then advise them on why they should also stop using plastic and why they should turn to alternative sort of uses instead of plastic for a greener future.
I love that. I love it's no matter what you decide you want to do, taking any step is you beginning your climate journey. And it might not feel like you're making a large impact at the beginning or at any step along the way, but like you're saying, even those small things add up to your own commitment and making this big difference. Any final thoughts for this group of young people from around the world who are going into this solutions summit design set of activities? Any final thoughts for them, Bertine?
I just would like to expand a little bit more and say that I see that any contribution, climate action from young individuals are so important, and they are such important actions because we are together striving towards to rebuild, reboot, and fix the damage that our older generations have left us to deal with. So thank you so much for all that you do. And I really hope that we can all achieve that greener future we aspire to reach.
Thank you so much, Bertine. Thank you for the work that you have done and that you are doing. And thank you for letting us all know that being in the beginning of your climate journey is a great place to be, especially when you have all of the young people in this community to learn from and to work with. So appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we will talk to you soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Thanks, Bertine. Bye, everyone.